to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have invited onto the show Dr. Michael Kotzen of Higher Brain Living. He's a very interesting man. He's got a background originally in chiropractic, and from there he has morphed and evolved into the development of a system, a technique of helping us move forward in our brain and our consciousness from being dominated by the reptilian brainstem, where we tend to live so much of our lives caught in between fight and flight, fear and anxiety, up into the higher levels of our brain functioning, that is into the prefrontal cortex. And this work is so interesting that when I first heard about it, I knew he was someone that I wanted to share with all of you on A Better World, because you could almost say that a lot of a new world is predicated on this kind of inner brain development. So it's really with great pleasure and honor that I have invited Michael to join us today, and you'll learn firsthand a lot about this kind of work. Hey, Michael.
Hey, Mitchell. Thank you for that great introduction. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad to have you.
Yep.
And you have excited me about what you're doing. I mean, it's sort of like I write about this, I teach about this, I use this in my counseling. I say, let's get physiological, in my therapy practice,
Yeah.
And you are doing it. So tell me, how did you come across this, and then what is it?
Yeah, well, I want to say also thank you for saying that, because I think so many people try a lot of things, go to a lot of workshops, talk about it, read about it, but I believe this is really where the rubber hits the road, so to speak,
Yes.
and that these changes in the physiology are really key to that next emergence of our growth as an individual, and then collectively as a culture. And I believe...
And actually, I think it would say, it's fair to say, as a species.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Following a cultural change is
Yeah.
a species-wide change. You better believe it.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I agree with you completely. I mean, I remember studying hypnotherapy, Ericksonian hypnotherapy, Michael, many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned to my teachers who lived with Erickson, brilliant people,
Mm-hmm.
and said, what's the physiology of hypnotherapy?
Right.
And they looked at me like, what? And I said,
Yeah.
I want to know, what is the physiological substratum
Right.
of what we're doing? I
Right.
understand psychologically some of the effect we're having. It's beautiful. But let's get down to the cellular. Let's get down to the neuronal.
Right.
And
I think that's been such a missing link that we're just now catching up on that level. And it's, to me, it's the key now. So many of our traditions, our transformative traditions, or our spiritual traditions, or many of them are thousands of years old, and they really developed at times when we had no real knowledge around brain physiology or evolution. I mean, we couldn't have. It just simply wasn't available.
That's right.
And so what happened, and even like meditation and yoga, so many of these things, and they're wonderful, but what I found in a very extensive study of human potential was that so many people just weren't really getting there. We had the stories, we had the idea, we had the concepts, but we didn't have the vehicle that really delivered the goods on that level. And what I found was the missing link was literally the human brain, or that specific highly evolved part of the human brain, that it was required to get energy into that to create the kind of changes we were really looking for. And so everything else was just kind of partial, without being able to really get that physiology to shift, or that brain to shift in that way.
Right, exactly. I'll bring up this question to start with, because I agree with you, and I'm really pleased to hear it's like we've been ensconced in imagery, metaphor, ideology regarding things such as Zen and meditation overall, etc., but without the physiological substrate, which
Right.
you are, and neuroscience is helping to provide these days, which
Right.
is gorgeous, I
Yeah.
think. And so we have, in other words, a physiology now for psychotherapy,
Right.
which I just titillates me.
Yeah, yeah,
Titillates me,
yeah,
because there's
yeah.
got to be that level, and you're
That's right.
helping to bring that forth. Then again, consciousness is not limited to our nervous system or to our brain system either.
Right?
Could you just comment on that? I'm going to the end before
Yeah.
the beginning.
You're going to
Sorry.
stretch it out there really quickly. No, that's great.
No, right.
These are the conversations I love, Mitchell.
Yeah, sure.
And I want to clarify one thing is that we, by Higher Brain Living, by our organization and our training programs and our whole story, we lead with the brain, because to me that's been such a missing link for so long. But I'm at the same time, to speak to that, I'm not a reductionist in the sense that I believe all consciousness or inner experience is created by the brain. I believe it's correlated with it. And so that there's associations between our consciousness, our emotions, our inner experience, our thought processes, and our physical brain. It can access from either direction and make change. But we have to take into account all of this, and that brain piece has been missing. And so here's what I will say, is that I agree with you about consciousness. But if you're going to have an experience of advanced consciousness or advanced states of consciousness, if you're going to have the experience of a oneness connection with God, if you're going to have the experience of purpose,
I'll
of
take
meaning,
two of those.
any of those things, if you're going to do that on this planet, at this time, in this life, that prefrontal cortex is going to have to get energy for you to have that embodied experience. And that, I believe, is pretty much a fact today.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. In fact, I think that you said it has to be exercised. Those neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex must be exercised in order to replicate the experience.
That's right.
Otherwise, it's a one-off, as they say.
That's right.
Yes, I saw God, and then where did he go? It's over.
Yeah, what's next?
Yeah,
right?
what's next? So you're, in a sense, laying the track down, the neural net
Yes.
that would allow for that kind of percolation to occur over and over again.
Beautifully said.
Is that a fair way of putting
I
it?
love it. I love
Okay.
it. Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful.
And to take a case in point is,
Yeah.
we've heard a lot about positive thinking and positive psychology and
Yes.
creating affirmations, and I think all of those things are wonderful. But when I really took a hard look at the data, and I started to look at what number of people were really changing, and I don't mean just being a little more comfortable in the life that you have. I mean vertical transformative change, moving up to higher stages, whole new worldviews, whole new ways to be in the world. When I really looked at this closely, what I found was it really wasn't happening for very many people, and even when they were seeking for years, it wasn't happening. And what I'm suggesting is, I'm insisting that that lower brain in us is dominant, and it wants to keep our life the same. So just changing your thinking or creating an affirmation, if it's still anchored into lower brain physiology, you don't get there. You have to create the right brain state and then create the affirmation or the positive thinking, etc., and marry those two things, and that's how real transformative change happens.
That was beautiful. And yes, and then yes again. It's almost like an affirmation is a thin layer of thought on top of a raging, tumultuous subconscious that doesn't agree with the assertion of the affirmation.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yes, I like that framing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Where are you going to go from that? You know,
Right.
it's not going to work.
You can't get there from here.
That's right. You can't get there from here. But,
Yeah.
but what you're talking about, Michael, of changing the entirety of perspective, the entirety of consciousness that goes from a fear-based being,
Yes.
which interprets all of reality one way,
Yes.
to what we've been promised, in a sense, through our human potential and the conversation about that for millennia.
Yep.
What's possible for a human being
Yes.
is what you're talking about.
That's
And
right.
as you well put it, it correlates with brain development.
Yes.
It correlates.
Yes.
And that's a really
Yes.
interesting distinction to make.
And so we've spent, for instance, 3,000 years perfecting interior meditation approaches, but how long have we spent learning how to change the other side of that equation go right into changing the physical brain, getting energy into that part of the brain, which I believe is lagging behind, and it's the missing link in all of this personal development now, is that we have to get that shift in physiology. The biological system has to upload energy into those higher systems, which are
Yes.
there but latent. They're untapped potential.
Exactly. It's like having meridians that have no chi flowing through them.
A very, very good point.
Right? You
Yep,
know, it's almost
absolutely.
like that. And you mentioned earlier about your appreciation of the work of Ken Wilber
Mm-hmm.
and the four quadrants. And as you were just talking, I was just
Yeah.
reflecting on that
Mm-hmm.
a bit, and how it's also the integration between the four quadrants that
That's right.
just to be interior will only take our entire planet and culture so far.
And you yes.
You can't meditate, you know, some nice quinoa onto your table at dinner.
Right.
It ain't gonna happen. You know, you need a couple
Right.
of other little integrative things to occur.
Yes.
A few verbs.
Yes.
You
And-
know,
and-
like
and so-
planting, harvesting.
Yeah, no, and so you can, and it's a fact, you can change your brain through meditation. But the challenge is it takes a very long time. I mean, we talked earlier about the studies of Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, when the Dalai Lama brought
And the
meditators in, handpicked
Tibetan
them.
Buddhists,
The
right?
Tibetan Buddhists, because he said, these people can get into these advanced states of consciousness. They're my top meditators. I want to measure their brains and see the change. They measure their brains. They can see changes in the prefrontal cortex of the brain when they're in these advanced states. Here's the rub, so to speak. The meditators, the Tibetan meditators, their average meditation practice had been 30 years long for an average of 4 hours every day. Now, Mitchell, we know, I don't think there's a lot of people out there that are going to make this commitment. And so, I think there's a much faster way for this to happen. When we first engage the brain, we don't have to meditate forever until it finally cracks and the physiology changes and we get these neuroplastic changes in there. We can go right into there and we can create changes there, and then we can start plugging in these other things that we want to change in our life, or even other modalities. Once that system is online, there's an opening to take in and utilize things on a much higher level. And so we lead with getting that brain to shift, because it's been a completely missing link, and it accelerates the whole process. And then, as you said, even with meditation, there isn't often a what's next. You just fumble around and figure it out, even if you have change. Well, with our system, we have a way to engage that higher brain, which creates like we call this view from 50,000 feet. It creates this perspective of clarity, where you can see past the chaos in your life. It creates confidence, empowerment, the experience of purpose, meaning as a fact. These are all part of what happens when the prefrontal cortex gets energy.
Mhm.
And so we want to be able to bring that higher brain energy and that empowered state to the areas of our life that we want to make change in. That's the way real change happens. And the reason they're not changing is because those areas are anchored into the lower brain, and it has a biological imperative to remain the same. To the lower brain, sameness equals safety. It wants to play the same patterns over and over because its job is just simply to keep you from being eaten by a tiger. And that,
And it worked yesterday. Actually, it worked just the last moment.
yes,
And therefore, that brain will repeat that.
That's right.
And hence, the you could say the adaptable survival function of habit.
and it gets almost hardwired in there. Those
It
habits are
definitely is
neurologically
hardwired.
hardwired. You
That's
know?
right.
And the faces change and the places change, but the life stays the same.
That's right.
Because that lower brain says, well, yeah, this is perfect. We have everything we want. We woke up the next day. Okay, that's all it cares about, and it's doing all of this below the conscious threshold. We don't even know it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what is it that you do in your system, Michael, that activates the prefrontal cortex in this way?
Okay, well, great question. So we've pretty well established that there's this higher untapped part of the human brain. It's the most recent emergence in evolution. It's specifically called the prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the brain where, as we said, the Tibetan meditators, when they're in deep samadhi states of consciousness, that part of the brain is turned on. We know if you're experiencing gratitude, purpose, meaning, that part of the brain is turned
Love
on.
and
Love-
compassion.
Yeah, love and compassion.
All the
Even-
juicy things about our lives and virtues,
Yes.
actually,
And even
are
the,
correlated, yeah.
you better believe it. That's a virtue. I love that word.
Yeah.
And even the ability to see our compelling future, to see beyond what we're locked
As
into.
in clairvoyance and the parapsychological domain, absolutely.
Yes, and even just.
Is that what you meant,
Yeah,
or-
it's not what I meant, but I think that's
Okay.
true. But
Yeah.
I think that's all true. And what I meant was simply the ability to see where you can be and then take the actual steps to make that happen. That all comes from the higher brain.
And as a therapist, certainly, we're looking at this all the time. And that's why I actually adore neuroscience, because I can now see the mapping as neural pathways
Right.
that have been well tread.
Yeah.
And now we're opening up the potential for new pathways to be tread in different parts of the brain that are meaningful.
Yes.
And nor is it just the mammalian, but that's a good place too. But we're talking about something that's bigger and deeper
Yes.
and richer, a reservoir of potential. I mean, and also hovering around what you're saying is the potential for creativity and spontaneity.
Yep. You better believe
How do
it.
you get spontaneity if you're in reactive mode?
That's right. Or creativity.
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
creativity.
it wants to be the same.
That was exactly. It's the
Yeah,
antithesis,
that's right. That's
actually.
right. That's right.
So, as I was saying to you playfully earlier, when I say to my clients, let's move forward in our lives. I mean, and so everybody has an idea of what that means. But I'm also thinking, and I say it, moving from the reptilian brain into the prefrontal
Yep.
cortex.
Yep.
That's moving forward,
Yep.
folks.
Yes.
Yes. Literally.
Yes.
And that's a good thing.
You better believe it.
So I still want to know, you do interesting things
Yeah, I never did answer that question.
to the
best.
body, right? I didn't forget.
Yeah, me either.
You're speaking my language.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise.
Absolutely, Michael.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank
And your website is
Higherbrainliving.com.
wonderful. We'll have it next to your name in our subtitles anyway. Really, thank you for the good
No,
work you're doing.
Yeah,
It's
thanks.
really
That was fun.
wonderful. Great.
Yep.
This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to write to me at mjr@abetterworld.net. My initials, mjr@abetterworld.net. Visit us at our website, www.abetterworld.tv, and be in touch. I love getting your thoughts and feelings and comments about our shows. Thanks again, and I'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
I'd like you to meet Sarah.
Hello, Dr. Cotton.
Hello, Sarah. Sarah has volunteered to participate in a Higher Brain Living session today. I'm going to do a demonstration with her, and you're going to see this amazing response in her physiology. The demonstration is only going to be about 10 minutes long. We're condensing this for the video. Ordinarily, these are 45-minute long sessions and part of a 22-step program. During this Higher Brain Living demonstration, I'm going to be making gentle contacts into pathways in Sarah's body. As these pathways are contacted in just the right way and right sequence, there's going to be a release of energy that moves up to her higher brain and creates a surge of energy that lights up the higher brain, and her higher brain will create its own feedback mechanism, further energizing itself. And what you're going to see is an expansion of breath and energy in her body and movement in her body as her own higher brain is starting to promote energy to light up the highest parts of her brain. So watch this. And you can see this change in breath. We call that a salutogenic breath. Energy is now building from these pathways, releasing energy. We directed it into her higher brain. And her higher brain is waking up. We can even measure this with EEG. Her higher brain is waking up, and it's now promoting its own strategies, its own feedback mechanism to further energize itself. Everything that you're seeing happening in her body is spontaneous. She's not making it happen. She could stop it, but she doesn't want to because it's dissipating the stress response out of the lower brain and energizing the part of the brain where we have more joy, more gratitude, more passion, more purpose. And now for this final part of the demonstration and session, I'm going to have Sarah lay on her back. Sarah, will you go ahead and roll over onto your back, please? And look at that amazing response in her body as her brain is getting more energy, releasing its stress and moving into this growth response out of the stress part of the brain into the higher thriving part of the brain. This is a potential that's in all of humanity. Well, that's almost one of the first foundational things that happens through higher brain living. Stress is produced by the lower brain. What stress is an active lower brain trying to protect you from your environment. And so when energy shifts from the lower brain into the higher brain, as it does by higher brain living, the lower brain has to loosen its grip. It has to give its stuff up. And there's a dump or release of that lower brain tension as a flow of energy moves into the prefrontal cortex or the higher brain. The University of Iowa is now doing a subjective study looking at how this program changes standardized testing for everything from depression to anxiety to stress disorders, but also thriving components, looking at how people are starting to thrive in their life. There's a study right now that's being done through the University of Iowa that's just begun. If I could offer an invitation to the world, what that invitation would say is that our species has been stuck in the lower survival part of the brain. But we have evolved and emerged a higher part of our brain that can liberate us, that can set us free, that can allow us to create heaven on earth. And that we now have a system that's been developed called higher brain living that is specifically designed to energize that higher brain, to make that a reality, and for us to be able to use that, create a new life and a new world. And I would invite them to join this revolution. Well, there's basically two ways to find out if this is a good fit for you. And you can either attend a live presentation that either I do or one of my national presenting team does in different areas of the country. Go to higherbrainliving.com. There's an event page on the website, and it will list where I'm going to be next. You can come out and see that. I'm going to do live presentations there, and we're going to discuss a lot of the licensing details. You can also go to a webinar. Okay, at this webinar, you be invited to the webinar. At the webinar, you're going to learn, again, all of the licensing details, the real nitty-gritty, the real fine points that you need to know about this. Everything from the cost of the program to where the program is going to be, to when you receive your online modules, to how everything works. So no question is unanswered. You leave that webinar knowing everything you could possibly want to know about licensing, and being able to enroll in the program right there, which you'll receive your modules very quickly when you do that, and learn where you attend on-site training.
Hi, I'm Doug Bingley, and I'm originally from St. Louis. And I became a Higher Brain Living facilitator because I felt moved to do something more. I've been doing massage therapy, integrated energy healing, forgiveness work, breath work for many, many years. And I just got to that place where I felt like I needed something deeper, something more for my life, and something more than I could give to my clients that would take them to the next level. And I was guided into this work. And since doing so, it's absolutely transformed my life. I've moved, I've entered into a new relationship, which is the sweetest of my life. I am reunited with my children in a way that is incredibly a gift in my life. And every day my life is bliss and joy relative to what it was. And I thought it was good then. Plus, as I'm starting my career, helping others in this work, I find it's the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. To hear my people come in and say, my whole life is changing, I'm so excited, let me tell you what happened this week, is the sweetest reward that I've ever had in my life. People used to say, oh, that's a great body work session, that was wonderful, but this is deeper. Their whole soul is thanking me for what they have received. And I understand that because that's what I'm feeling in my life, my whole life, changing and transforming. This is a distillation of everything I've seen, the best thing I've seen. I've been a searcher my whole life for personal transformation. And I've been to many things, studied a lot of things. Nothing like this pulls it all together and gives you the power inside to really move with a tangible, structured, orderly system to move forward in your life, to shift that which is holding you back and to liberate your life, to empower you to do what you want to do. So I would recommend Higher Brain Living to anyone who wants to improve themselves and just move your life forward, whatever it is, transform it, live more, enjoy your life more, feel more bliss and in your heart and in your life.